Hi, Rachel.
Hello, all right.
Yeah, how are you?
All right, thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah. Having a few.
Yes, I think, yes. Can you just hear me or can you hear, do you hear me fine?
Yeah, hearing you fine. Yes, absolutely.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you.
Morning, Morgan. You're joining us for this part of the meeting.
Yes, good morning. Actually, sorry I couldn't make the briefing. Work is incredibly busy at the moment, so I had to make a decision on to attend the briefing or to attend the meeting. So I thought I would attend the meeting without the briefing. So I do apologise.
Yeah, that's fine. No, thanks for joining us.
Hello.
Nick Stevens has just messaged me to say he may be a couple of minutes late because his current meeting's overrunning.
Okay. We didn't have a Surrey County Council representative, did we, in the first part of the meeting? So
Yeah, Richard.
Yeah.
Richard was with us.
Well, I mean, yeah, you're obviously the officer representative, but we always
Yeah,
used
we
to
didn't
have
have
Marissa
No.
or Natalie,
No.
but neither of them. Okay.
Are either of them coming to this meeting, Richard? Do you know?
Not that I am aware, Kelly. Sometimes I'm the last to hear, so
Could be an element of surprise.
yeah.
Right. I've now got that as 11:31 on the iPad clock. Okay. Right, let's kick off this meeting of the Joint Waste Collection Services Committee. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. I haven't received any apologies from members of the committee, but I understand Jo is unable to attend the actual meeting. So,
Yeah, so Jo's off work. She's unwell at the moment. So Gogo and Sarah have joined us.
Yeah.
And Daniel Wright's unable to attend. She's on annual leave.
Okay. But we do have an Amy representative. Sorry, who was that? Oh, it's George. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, George. Okay, good. Thank you for that. Okay, item number 2, minutes of the last meeting. Are there any comments, questions, queries on the minutes? No. Okay, we'll take those as an accurate record of the meeting held on the 28th of September 23. And members, do any members have any declaration of interests? No. Okay, so the first main item of business then is the quarterly waste and recycling performance report. Who's going to take the lead on that?
That'll be me, Councillor Tilling. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kingsley.
Yeah, so the performance report, let me just get my slideshow up for the board members who have kind of seen this a bit early. The board meeting, there has been some updates, but nothing to major to worry about. Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to work my thing out. Let's. Right, that should be all working now. Perfect.
Yep, that's good.
Great. So let's go through this. So first slide, if it's going to work, yes, is the recycling performances. So this is the changes of tonnage rolling up to September 23, comparing it to September 2022. So you can see for the all material types, there's been a general increase. DMR, there has been a decrease for apart from Woking. Woking had a small increase. So Elmbridge, Moore Valley and Surrey Heath were in line with the rest of Surrey. Food decrease, everyone was in line with that. Some Elmbridge was a bit higher, while the rest were a bit lower than Surrey. Garden, there has been an increase throughout. The joint authorities have a larger increase, and that is still because we're doing a rolling tonnage up to September, so we still got the after effects of the garden waste disruption last year. Residual for all of Surrey is mostly stable, with a small decrease, and but however, Mole Valley and Woking had a slightly larger decrease, and Surrey have a little bit of an increase, but mostly remaining quite low on that. So that's just tonnage. The next, we're going to talk about recycling rates. So the top one is the recycling rate for the quarter. You can see that. So in the board, we didn't have the updated contamination. We didn't have any contamination rates, the updated ones, but we have updated them. However, that hasn't really changed anything major for the board. So it's just small changes. But as you can see, we have improved compared to the same quarter last year. And in the 12-month one, it is the same. We have also improved on all areas, including all of Surrey, for the recycling rate. So going through each material type, the main material types, the graphs, the left side is the Surrey Environment Partnership and the right side of the joint authorities. You can see the trends are similar. The only thing I should note is August. So collection days in August are slightly different for Mole Valley and Woking. They are opposite. So Mole Valley had 13 days of DMR and 10 days of household, while Woking is the opposite. So 10 days of DMR and 13 days of household. So that's why if you look at the graph, the peaks are reverse. But that is not to do with the tonnage, that's to do with the collection days. Next is food. Food, nothing to really report here except for trends are very similar. They're following the same pattern as Surrey, and it's going down. Garden waste, yeah, nothing really to report here as well. Pattern is following the same, trends are going down again. And this is residual waste, and the only thing to report here is the August, Wise, Mole Valley and Woking, we're opposite, and that is just because of the collection days as mentioned before. But nothing really major to report as well. So now I'm going to go through the performance indicators for Amy. So this is Elmbridge. I've added the targets now as requested. So KPI 1 all below target. KPI 2 relatively high. KPI 2 to 4, I mean, it's relatively high. And then KPI 5 is low. So that's Elmbridge. Mole Valley, so KPI 1 mostly in target, but it hits a high in September and is above target. And this was reported due to incomplete rounds. If the GoGo has any information she wants to add, please do, but it is mostly just because of incomplete rounds. KPI 2 was a little high, KPI 3 was mostly low, but then it was high in September. That's probably an effect from KPI 1. KPI 4 was a little higher than KPI 5 was low. Sorry, and I meant KPI 1 was incomplete garden waste. Sorry, just to clarify, to be more specific. Surrey Heath, KPI 1 was below target. KPI 2 was a little higher than normal, but 3 to 5 low as usual. For Woking, KPI 1 was below target. KPI 2 was a little high this quarter, higher than expected, but still good. relatively, and then KPIs 3 to 5 low. So that is my report for now. And if there's any questions, please let me know.
Good. Thanks very much, Kingsley. As Elmbridge is first on your list, if I can ask questions on that first of all, then we'll come to other areas. I would hope that the decrease in food waste would actually show an uptick, because there is an SEP trial now, which we just rolled out in Elmbridge, for all flats to recycle food waste. So previously, I think flats found it difficult. They didn't have the caddies, they didn't have the collection bins. So I think Agogo could correct me, but it's something like over 300 flats have now been issued with food waste caddies and bins. So hopefully we will be collecting more food waste in Elmbridge over the next few months. Interesting that on your chart, fly tipping actually month on month. So September 23, fly tipping was down to 0 in Elmbridge. I hope that's as a result of the trial we're running with a contractor called Kingdom, which is to try and reduce the rubbish and litter around Elmbridge. A 6-month trial, but that includes putting in cameras at one of the most popular fly tipping spots. And I think probably just the fact that we've got cameras somewhere in Elmbridge is acting as a deterrent. So it's good to see that that's actually dropped to 0 for September. Let's hope that continues. On the
Sorry, Councillor, I should add
Yeah.
with the fly tipping, we are currently having some weird data issues with Suez, so I'm not 100% confident that is a 0. It might not be high, but it's just because Suez have done some recategorization of their material types, and we are working with them and SCC to try to fix that. So, and I've been updated. It is not 0.
Oh, right. Okay.
That was just
Okay. No,
an update.
I was a bit surprised to see that as 0.
Yeah,
because,
so,
we've
yeah.
only got cameras in one spot, so
Mhm.
presumably fly tipping has continued in other areas.
Yeah, but we are working to fix that data.
Okay.
So yeah,
But hopefully fly tipping tonnage has generally dropped due to the.
yeah. I think it has actually generally dropped, so that is
Right.
good.
Can I just ask about the KPIs?
Yeah,
It was a bit alarming from your table again that miscollections sort of seem to peak at 215 per 100,000 in June, which was clearly well above the target. Good to see it's now dropped to 78 and 72 in August and September. But what accounted for that massive increase in sort of May 27, June 215?
yeah. Let me just go back to my old notes to see what was that peak, unless Agogo can remember on the top of her head. But so that was due to white space being introduced, and that new system had a bit of teething issues with getting information to the right people to get the miscollections collected. Is that correct, Agogo?
So in during that, so May, June, what we had the integration of 2 systems, which is Elmbridge's open process and white space for AME, and the 2 system, and obviously the operational implications of that and getting that to work. So those few months we had a bit of teething issues with getting the crews used to working that way. Was that as things have settled, it's not unusual to see the numbers drop off.
Also,
Right.
did we also, correct me if I'm wrong, garden rounds didn't complete in May and June as well. So that was another factor as well.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Okay, thanks. And finally, for me, I should know the answer to this, but what's the difference between a miscollection and a assisted collection?
An assisted collection is when someone who might not be able to move their bin or their bins to the front of the presentation bit, and the crews go and collect it themselves. Because when we present our bins or boxes, we can do it ourselves, but some people are not able to do that due to disability or any other factors. So that is an assisted collection, because the crews go out and collect it themselves from wherever they are stored.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. So the target is 0, but we're still above that. But again, it's
Yeah.
there was that peak in May and June, probably because of white space, but that's now dropped in number. So okay, right. So the trend is in the right direction.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Next up is Mole Valley. Any questions there, Rosemary?
Yes, a couple of questions. I mean, it's good to see that our recycling rate went up in Q2, but the rate at which it's the residual waste is going down is too slow to meet the target. So what's the strategy there for meeting the targets, the national targets for reducing residual waste?
Do you want me to come in on this one, Kingsley?
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks.
That's fine. So this is a national trend that we're seeing. This isn't just a localized position. Is that post-COVID, the tonnages on recycling and that seem to be dropping off faster than the tonnages on the residual waste element, and that's similar on the food waste side of things as well. And you couple that with the cost of living crisis as well, then people aren't perhaps producing as much food waste as they were previously. What we've been waiting for is the direction from government in terms of what the new reforms were going to be. So we're now starting to get greater clarity in relation to that around the simpler recycling. It's slightly disappointing from our perspective because we were hoping that kind of simpler recycling was really going to help push us to the next level and give us that catalyst to try and drive performance improvement. And for those authorities that don't have food waste collection and things like that, then it does provide that catalyst for them to improve performance. But unfortunately, it doesn't, do that for us in the same way. So what we'll be starting to work on in the spring next year is developing a new joint municipal waste management strategy for Surrey. And that will build upon, the sort of clarity that we're getting through the simpler recycling reforms and the statutory guidance. At the moment, the statutory guidance is indicating that we shouldn't be collecting residual waste less frequently than fortnightly. Ideally, one of the ways that's been clearly demonstrated to improve recycling is to reduce people's ability to throw away the residual waste. So that's either by reducing the frequency of the collection or reducing the size of container that people can put the residual waste in. So we're waiting to get clarity in terms of how that statutory guidance is going to play out, because there's a lot of people that have challenged that and said that it should be a localized decision, to try and improve performance. So once we've got that clarity, we can obviously feed that into our strategy and look at the way forwards. So really for us, it is about those perhaps less palatable decisions for some people in terms of the direction of travel. But if we want to have that significant step change in our performance, that's kind of the route that we need to be looking to go down, is how do we then encourage people to, move the waste into the right recycling containers and get it out of those residual waste containers.
Okay, I think, Rosemary, you're still on mute.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's the coughing. I keep putting it on. Yes, thank you, Kelly. The next point was on the missed collections, which showed an alarming increase. So is there an explanation for this?
So for the increase in September, which is above target, which Mole Valley rarely do, is due to incomplete garden waste collections, which is KPI 1, and that would obviously lead to KPI 3. Agogo, if you have any further information, that's great, but it's just incomplete collections of garden waste in September.
So is that going to be, how's that going to be put right?
Do you want to add anything, Agogo, or should I just say that the crew's already working on making sure the rounds are going complete?
I think that is probably a George's question, if I'm alright, because that's that's the crew's I mean, at that time of the year, Sorry, you're on mute, George. Sorry, I can't.
Sorry, I don't have that detail, unfortunately. I think I'd have to ask Danielle. And obviously she's on leave this week, so I couldn't answer that just now.
Well, we're quite out of line with the other boroughs, so you know, we clearly need an improvement there, don't we? And the other issue is the street cleaning. The litter and detritus survey, you know, doesn't look anything particular, but we've got real issues with street cleaning in our area, with the performance being very poor. So what's happening about that? Perhaps George can explain.
I think there's a couple of things. Obviously, you know, the street cleansing and detritus, especially the leafing, is very difficult to predict in terms of when the leaves will fall, and obviously the volume. We have also some issues with some of the equipment. The sweepers are beyond their serviceable life. We've been in discussion for, I don't remember, Kelly, how long, but probably 18 months to get new sweepers that were required after 5 years. I think they're now probably 6.5 towards 7 years old. Those are just about to be ordered now. I think we've had that signed off, and we've instructed that, Kelly. So they'll be coming soon, I hope.
Well, that definitely seems to be a big issue in Mole Valley, because we've got detritus on the main highways that's been there for going towards 2 years. Significant heaps of rubbish building up in the middle of the between the carriageways. So it really needs addressing. It's a serious issue.
Yeah, I think the approach in Mole Valley is slightly different to the other boroughs, and how actually we're how we work with JWS and Mole Valley and on the street cleansing. It's a slightly different approach, but we can look at that.
But I understand there's a vehicle off the road, and you know, can you not draft something in while it's being repaired? And
We do. I mean, we bring a lot of additional vehicles in, especially during the leafing season. So they have mobilised some more. But you know, as I say, that the sweepers are off the road an awful lot because they're really beyond their serviceable life.
Well, we've been waiting now for months for some of these issues to be sorted. So I'd like an assurance that there's you know, there's a date by which it's going to be done. This is the remediation.
What a date that the sweepers will, the new sweepers will come on, a date that this detritus will be removed. I'm not quite sure what.
Removing the detritus.
If somebody from JWS can tell me which area this is, I can point the team in that direction to make sure it's done. Usually they are.
I think it's already been pointed out. Right. I know Agogo's been asking for this. She might have something to add.
Just for to come in. Oh, sorry, go on. You go first to go, and then I'll go in after.
Yes, just for a benefit, that's for one of the main issues, especially for Councillor Hobbs. That's the A24 from the Cock Roundabout to North Homewood.
Mm-hmm.
That's the A24, and that includes the Central Reservation and the edge, and it's all the way along that haven't been cleaned for a while.
Okay, is that one we normally do in conjunction with the highway maintenance contractor for traffic management?
It's one you normally do with Surrey County Council, yes, but it's also one that even if Surrey County Council, for whatever reason, haven't organised a lane closure, then alternative means should be sought. So yes.
Okay, leave that one with me.
My understanding was that the lanes were closed. Amy didn't complete the clear while the lanes were closed, and the remediation didn't happen. And I understand you're supposed to come back you usually come back within a week. Well, nothing happened.
Okay, I'll have a look at that, Councillor Hobbs.
Thank you.
Okay, Thanks, George.
Councillor Tilling, if it's all right, just to come in on this one.
Yes,
quickly.
please do, Kelly.
I think, George, we're happy to provide kind of, the historical events, if you like, if that helps to provide chronology in terms of what's gone on so that you can look into it in more detail. I think a couple of other points just to pick up in relation to sort of what Councillor Hobbs and Agogo was saying is I'm not aware that any additional vehicles have been deployed in Mole Valley with the existing vehicle off the road, or that the level of resource has been increased in response to the leafing season. So it would be helpful to get clarity on that.
Okay.
And I was also slightly concerned when you said the street sweepers are just about to be ordered, because when Paul Springford was at the board meeting, I understood from that although there was this discussion around whether the instruction came from Joe or I, that actually the vehicles had been ordered. So I think it would be helpful if we could just get confirmation of.
Yeah, Kelly, there's a process we have to get through internally, just like you have to when we're doing a capital purchase. It's a significant value, so it has to go through a governance process. It has to actually go quite high up within Amy. Actually, it'll end up at executive board level to sign off on capital purchases. So it's just going through that process. It just takes time.
So does that mean the order hasn't actually been placed yet, or the
well,
order
the order hasn't actually been placed yet, but obviously we've got the provider, the supplier knows it's coming. It's just got to be signed off at exec level.
So that means that the lead time effectively hasn't kicked in yet if the orders haven't been placed yet.
It may well have done, because once we've spoken to the supplier and they know it's coming, you're in a queue really. So
I think it would be helpful if you could clarify the position and when we can expect those vehicles to arrive, because we were under the impression that they had been ordered and that the lead time on the majority of them was 6 months. And I think, if that is different, then we need to understand what's going on.
Yeah, I don't believe the lead time will change, or the delivery date will change. But I'll check on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
But it has to get, it's the same. You have governance processes when you spend money. We have to do the same thing. It doesn't matter if it's us buying it and you're paying for it. It still goes through the same process.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Yeah, it is obviously at the moment a major issue for residents. My inbox has been fairly full with people complaining about the leaves in the streets. And it's been very significant over the last 4 weeks. We had a dry spell, but then suddenly the colder spell. Lots of leaves have fallen over the last 4 weeks or so. We've had lots of rain. The leaves have been washed into gutters. The water then can't drain away, so we've had sort of localized flooding on the streets. So it has become a sort of major issue to make sure the leaves are swept out of the streets as quickly as possible. But thank you for your answers and your agreement to investigate that, George.
Okay.
Okay, shall we come on to Surrey Heath and your stats there? Morgan, any questions?
I know that Nick's got his hand up as well, so I'll let him come in after me. I don't have any. Well, I do. I was just the questions around just looking at the recycling performance with regards to textiles, and I know that's an area that we've been interested in expanding. I'm just curious as to why there's been a 100% reduction in the change year from 22 to 23. I was wondering if I know there must be an explanation for, and unless I'm looking at the wrong part of the report, I do apologize. I'm currently looking at page 17, which is in the annex of the wider the performance. Is there sorry.
Yeah, sorry. No, sorry. Thank you, Councillor. So Surrey Heath Textiles, so two things. So one, textiles is a bit sporadic and it can be difficult. So the percentages look really high when they decrease. However, there has been a slight data issue with Surrey Heath Textiles, which Kelly pointed out to me, and we are currently working on that. So one of my team members is reviewing all the textiles data for Surrey Heath. So hopefully the next update will get that all backdated. It might be still a decrease, but there should be data appearing. So that is on our list of getting that sorted.
Thank you, Kingsley. And I'm just assuming as well as that, I guess you said sporadic. Generally, you might, is it kind of in your experience that with textiles, they kind of get donated at certain times of the year. I'm thinking maybe after Christmas, when in the new year. So it's kind of it's not kind of, I guess when I'm comparing it to the kind of the moving annual total, it's not as big of a drop. So I'm just wondering, is that kind of expected as well?
Yeah.
And also, I guess more generally, it's kind of, as Councillor Tilley and Councillor Hobbs have already kind of mentioned, is what's really the strategy in place to increase recycling rates in general? It's kind of, it's a much wider question that I don't really think is for you to answer, Kingsley, but it's just kind of, we're seeing the numbers kind of decreasing, which is not anything, I don't think, which is because of a failing service, but I think it's just because changes in behaviour. So I'm just wondering, how do we counteract that? And that's probably a question for Kelly rather than you, Kingsley. I do apologise. Thank you.
That's fine. I think just picking up in relation to the textiles tonnages, as Kingsley said, there is this kind of anomaly over the data, and some of the data seems to be delayed coming through to us. But you're absolutely right. There's seasonal variations, New Year clear out, spring cleans, change of season when people put their summer clothes away, get the winter clothes out, that kind of stuff. We tend to see peaks and troughs in that way. In relation to the future strategy, we basically are, if you remember, we developed CEP 2025 as a bridging strategy until we got greater clarity from government in terms of, the future direction of travel. We're starting to get more clarity on that now in terms of the simpler recycling side of things. And so what we'll be doing is obviously looking at developing a new joint municipal waste management strategy for the future. There's some stuff in there that will be mandated that we will need to deliver. So as the simpler recycling reforms have got, for example, whilst most of our houses have got the ability to do food waste collections, there's still 23,000 properties that don't. And as it's currently drafted, all households will need to have access to a food waste collection. So we've, got effectively, 2 and a bit years to roll that out by March 26. Then by 27, there needs to be the ability for flexible plastics to be collected separately. And whilst that's not particularly weighty, it's quite a significant volume, if you like, of material. So what we're probably going to do is, when we look towards designing the new contract and the specification for the new contract, we will model different scenarios and different, collection methodologies for the material, with a view to looking about what does that do to our recycling rates, as well as what does that do for the cost of the service going forwards. And we'll then be looking for the authorities to, provide a steer in terms of what's the preferred route that we would then be looking to go out to tender on. I mean, we generally do, output specifications, so it's more down to the contractor to bid back how they would like to do the collection arrangements. But if we've got kind of an indication of, which is likely to yield the most cost-effective solution and drive up performance, then, we'll provide a clear steer in terms of the route that we want to go down.
Thanks,
so
Kelly.
it's in amongst the joint municipal waste management strategy and the procurement of a new service provider.
Just to follow up, if I might, Chair, just on one point, when you mentioned the 23,000 that don't have access to food waste collection, is that within the joint authorities or across Surrey?
No, that's county-wide. Yeah, that's across Surrey.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks very much. Nick, did you have a question?
I do. I'm just mindful that Peter had his hand raised first, so I'm not sure if he wants to come in before I.
Are you specifically going to ask about Surrey Heath?
It was more general, actually, so I can wait.
Okay, well let's finish off going through the stats for Woking next then. So Peter, if you'd like to ask any question.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to pick up on what Morgan just said about textiles and we. It does seem that, for example, textiles has gone down by 100%. So I'm assuming that's the same answer, Kingsley, is it? As you've just given. You're nodding. Yeah.
Yes, it is the same answer. Yeah, I can. I will put a review for textiles to make sure we're getting the data. Yeah, it is really getting the data from our contractors that is can be quite slow and difficult. But I can put it on the list for the whole review for all of the joint authorities to double check. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it says we're down to 0, which doesn't seem to make sense.
it's also timing of data. So sometimes when I do the report, we haven't received the data.
Oh, okay.
So
Mm.
it's difficult. But yeah, it's not difficult for me to get my team to do a review on all textiles, and making sure we get all that data in.
The other question was about missed assisted collections. Actually, I take it we've got 31 out of, and I'm assuming it's out of 100,000. As well as the.
No, I believe, Sarah, if I'm correct, that is just the number, isn't it? That's not out of 100,000. That's just the number.
No, only KPI 1 is the per 100,000. The rest of them are just the standard number.
Yeah, so that's 31 out of the whole of Woking in September.
Right. So that does beg the question: how many assisted collections have we now got? Because I know we had a review of assisted collections, and it went right. We pulled quite a number of people out of assisted collections. So we got the updated, or the old and the updated figures, so we can sort of actually see what how 31 stacks up against.
Yeah, so Kingsley, if you want, I can kind of assist with this. I don't know the exact figure off the top of my head, and Amy are still removing in a phased approach, because obviously we did absolutely do the review. We wrote to just over 2,300 people. Roughly 1,800 of those are due to kind of come off,
wow,
which is a huge chunk. Bearing in mind, we did only write to the people who've been on the service for 2 or more years. So, you know, we didn't necessarily write to everyone, but the vast majority. But we should be bringing that number down to more sort of the 700 mark would be the end goal. But because just in case, for any reason, those residents we did write to didn't receive the letter for whatever reason, or didn't get a chance to reply, that's why we're moving them at 200 properties per week, just to phase any inquiries and get people added straight back on. So it should come down to a much lower figure in the region of 700. But some of those reports there of missed assisted could just be where, as I say, we've had to add people back on and they've subsequently logged a missed collection because they've incorrectly come off the register. But it's not a huge, given the number of people in the borough. Thankfully, 31 sounds quite high, but it's not too bad in the grand scheme of things.
In the grand scheme, but then we've got 32 out of 100,000 of missed general collection. So actually, proportionally, it's a bit higher, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think that's the difficulty. I think our concern was Woking has always had the highest number of assisted collections, and again, we can only put that down to perhaps a bit of miscommunication and us taking people off of the register and then subsequently logging that miscollection. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It is high when you compare it to the number of general miscollections, and we're working quite heavily with the local depot on the basis we knew with that review we might get a bit of kickback and a few more miscollections logged.
I mean, and of course, I don't need to say this, but people who have assisted collections are quite naturally more vulnerable, maybe, who need assistance with dragging those the bins. So, I think it is something that we do need to look at.
Can I just follow up on that, Peter? I think, Kingsley, it would be useful if you could, in your tables, actually put in how many assisted collections there are supposed to be in each of the boroughs and districts. So we've got a better feel for those stats on missed assisted collections.
Yep, I can get that added to the report.
Thank you. It is really important because yes, of the messages I get, several of them are from people who have assisted collections, and quite rightly they're upset that they haven't been collected. Yeah. The second follow up on that is there a cost to an assisted collection, and what is it?
Yes, there is a cost. Hang on. Off the top of my head, if you just give me 5 minutes, I'll just go and clarify the cost for you. But yes, it's based on a per property basis. There is a cost. So obviously trying to bring down the list is very much a beneficial thing to do.
So would that have an impact on the budget?
Yeah, in theory, the answer to that should be yes. Yep.
It will do, yes, but in the grand scheme of kind of the size of the budget it won't be hugely significant, but it will, it will have a marginal impact, because obviously if you're reducing the number of assisteds, then that cost comes out.
I mean, every penny counts in this part
Absolutely.
of the contract, I can tell you.
If it's helpful, Councillor Graves, I'll share that with you separately after that.
If you could, yeah, that'd be really helpful.
Just clarify the exact cost, but I will share that with you separately.
Okay. Apart that was my main thrust. Most of the other questions I had have been answered. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much. Nick, would you like to ask your question?
Thank you, Chair. It was in relation to paras 2 and 4 on page 9. So these are the general trends. All joint contract areas had decreases in food waste, but it then references that other than Elmbridge, the authorities were slightly lower than the Surrey average for food waste tonnages. And then also the residual waste, we saw Surrey Heath had a slight increase in its residuals of 1.5%. And I guess it's the question for JWS colleagues, what more can we do? Because I think collectively across the 4 boroughs, we'd like to be top of the tree within the county, if not nationally. And then being quite selfish about it, Surrey Heath would like to be even more top. So what are we missing? What can we do?
Well, first of all, Surrey Heath is usually on top anyway, so I think you're. I think that's
they weren't last year. They weren't last year. They lost out last year. Yeah. Be careful. I in terms of what more can we do, I mean, you know, we've obviously still seeing the impact of you know, finishing the flats off basically in Surrey Heath. So the majority of flats in Surrey Heath have now got the ability to access food waste collection. So, you know, we'll start to see kind of the uptake from that side. I think it is that scenario of, you know, we've been waiting to see what's happening with the reforms that are coming through and what might that mean for us. Because, you know, arguably there's steps that you could start to take in terms of, well, you know, perhaps do we look at reducing the bin sizes, not across the piece, but if there's a new development, do you provide that new development with the smaller size container? But then I wouldn't want you to jump the gun, because if you provide a smaller size container and then decide to go 3 weekly, you might have to change those containers because actually they don't provide enough capacity for 3 weeks over 2 weeks of residual waste collection. So that's where I think it's very much that kind of, we need to understand what the strategic direction is, so that we can then go full out on heading down one path or the other. I think, you know, you're not at that point where we can kind of go, well, let's try this, and because it could actually end up backfiring in the longer term strategy. So it's very much about, you know, the campaigns, the initiatives. It's that continual drumbeat of reminding residents what they can put in their food caddy, what they can put in the recycling bins, trying to get residents to sign up to the Rethink Waste initiative, you know, get schools engaged with that. There's nothing better than pester power from kids, you know, moaning at their parents for not recycling something or whatever. So it's all of that kind of, you know, continual drumbeat to help with the behaviour side, I think, for the moment, until we can get a clear strategic direction for the future.
There's things that we can promote as a borough through our comms team leading up to Christmas. Turkey drum beat, if you like. Would be very keen to do that.
Yeah, so there should be some campaign kits that will have been shared with your communications teams via the Knowledge Hub. What I can do is email out to each of you, you know, the details of what the campaign material is that's available. Because equally, if you can talk to your communications teams and encourage them to use that material, then we'd be very happy as well.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Any other sort of general questions based on Kingsley's report?
I think Councillor Rice's hand's up.
Yes, please. Okay. Just going back to the assisted collections point. What can you just go because I didn't know that was an available. I wasn't aware of that was an available option. I'm assuming, are we moving away from it as an option that residents can access, or what do residents have to do in terms of to be able to get an assisted collection? Do they have to demonstrate their inability to bring the bin out to the front? I'm just wondering what the process is for the application for that. And I would also, Sarah, would be very keen to understand the costing of the assisted collection as well. Just if you could just kind of just briefly, I guess, or just understand, take me through how the assisted collection process is awarded to a resident.
I'll let Sarah take the part on the process in a moment, but just to kind of, you know, pick up the you know, is that a service that we're looking at reducing? No. You know, if our residents need that service, then we have to make sure that, you know, the service is accessible to all. So if people need that service and need it provided, then we should absolutely be providing that service. But I'll let Sarah, it's good practice to review, obviously, who's on the list, because sometimes people go on the list because they've had an operation or something's happened, and actually they don't need to be on it longer term. So it's good practice to obviously review that periodically. Sarah.
Thank you. So yeah, the process, you can either apply online or by calling the contact centre. Essentially, anyone can, I guess, put in an application. You fill in a series of questions. There are, I guess, some kind of sort of filtering questions throughout the process. So we will ask, as part of the questions, is there anyone available that could help? Because we do try and limit it to only the places where really there is some support required, and obviously that is submitted. In terms of the fact that it's self-monitoring, Amy are obliged to add everyone to the register that has completed an application. But what we do ask Amy to do, and they do this in Woking and in Surrey Heath, I'm sure they do in the East as well, but obviously I can't comment on that, where they do believe that the assistance might not be required, they do tend to raise that to us, and we might just have a little chat with the resident just to confirm that, you know, that service is required. So that's how you get onto it. You know, as Kelly said, we're not looking to stop it, because there are genuinely those that require the help, but JWS are also responsible for reviewing the list every couple of years. And as Kelly says, that's just because circumstances do change, and more often than not, when we do the review, we do find out a lot of people sort of ring us up and say, oh, didn't even realize I had that service, so yes, I'll come off of it, thank you, I do present my bin. So that just does allow a bit of sort of efficiency checking. But yes, that's how the process works, and I will, as I say, after the meeting separately, I will share that information for Surrey Heath as well. We have recently performed a assisted collection review in Surrey Heath. There were a lot less assisted collections on there in the first place, but we did remove roughly 700 properties recently as well, and that's landed quite well. As far as I'm concerned, not a huge amount of complaints back, but that hopefully summarises the process for you.
Good. Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Okay, I think we can move on. I can't see any more hands up at the moment.
Councillor Hobbs has got a hand up.
Oh, you're at the top of my screen, Rosemary, so I'm afraid I can't see your hand.
Thank you. It was just going back to the food waste, because we'd had a lot of new bins in flats, and I just wondered if there's any preliminary data being, you know, have you collected any data yet to see if there's a change?
So as far as I understand it, the second round of monitoring has taken place, and the team are in the process of evaluating the results at the moment. So I haven't seen the results yet, but I don't think they're too far off being presented. So I would say possibly this side of Christmas, if not early in the new year, we will have some results from that.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good. Agenda item 5 then, Amy Improvement Plan update. So it's over to you, George.
Unfortunately, I can't give you much of an update on the improvement plan, because I've not had the information from Danielle before she went on leave, so I'm afraid we'll have to provide that next week.
Okay, good. Are you happy to take any questions that we've got?
You can try me.
Performance and improvement. We could try you.
You can try. I'm not as close as Danielle to the detail.
Okay. Are there any questions here for George? No, I can't see any. I think you're off the hook there then, George.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you could supply that
Yeah.
via Daniel when she's back from leave, that would be good. And okay, agenda item 6, quarterly budget report. I think that's Marco.
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'll start off with the CMO, which based on current estimates is pretty much going to come in on budget, with a small underspend being reported of £62. There are some overspends and underspends within the budget itself, which are shown on Annex 1. The two material ones, which have been explained in the report, are from the salaries and team budgets. The salaries budget is projecting a 26,500 overspend, which is due to having to pay a fixed pension charge, which due to an accounting oversight was not included in this year's budget. And the team's budget is projecting a 22,000 underspend, mainly from reduced spending on training, travel, and parking budgets. Now moving on to Amy's budgets, the core is projecting to spend 13.9 million, giving an underspend of 410,000. The variable budget is projecting to spend 2.65 million, giving an underspend of 78,000. As mentioned in the report, the underspends on the core and variable budgets are due to the less than budgeted inflationary uplift. Also mentioned in the report is the ongoing issue with Amy regarding the indexation percentage, for which JWS is still waiting for Amy to offer a meeting date. That was all I really wanted to run over, and happy to take any questions.
If I can ask first of all, then the team budget. I know that you've Neil left and wasn't replaced. Is that part of the sum that's included in that total figure for this year that you've saved on a salary? How does that affect the figures?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that have happened, to be honest. So obviously in the original structure there was to be 2 directors, whereas I've been sort of covering off, both director roles, if you like. What we've then looked to do is effectively do a bit of a small reorganization, if you like. So we didn't recruit into Neil's role, and as we updated recently, we've reviewed that role with a view to that position taking on the lead of the new procurement as well as kind of the commercial element. So the savings from not having the second director post are effectively funding the uplift for that role. What we also did was identified that we had a gap in monitoring resource within the team. So we had a monitoring officer on the East team, but we didn't have one on the West. So we've used some of that saving as well to actually recruit a monitoring officer within the West team, so that we've got sort of more people on the ground, having a look at activity and things as well. So yes, there is a bit of an underspend because we've had a period of time since Neil left us back in May, where we've been doing a bit of a reshuffle. So that will have been included in the figures that Marco has done. But going forwards, we would expect to be back up to where we were once all the posts, all the vacant posts are filled.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. I'm just a little concerned about the indexation then. So this was supposed to be an indexation as of April 2023, and that still hasn't been agreed. I'm assuming that Amy is paying its workers some sort of uplift, even though that this is an indexation of of what we pay Amy over the coming years. Can you just explain that in a bit more detail?
So, did you want to take that, or do you want me to take it?
If you could start off, Marco.
Yeah. So the indexation is applied to all of the costs on the core and the variable budgets. And as you know, we do calculate that indexation in March of each year based on the previous January to January calculation. But unfortunately, the figure that was calculated by ourselves using the usual methodology in March to apply to core and variable office invoices in April was 6.85%. However, Amy has altered the calculation and has proposed a couple of different figures, 7.2 and 7.28%, which we've not managed to resolve as yet.
Is there not some sort of industry standard that we can take to resolve that? I mean, it seems to be taking an awful long time. George, have you got any comment on that?
Well, it's one of a number of issues we're going through at the moment and disputed items. But I mean, normally indexation's usually relatively easy to calculate because there's set ways of calculating it. So I mean, really, it's just about getting our commercial people together and agreeing what is correct. Sometimes these have been incorrectly calculated previously, so there may be some cumulative correction. But just to put your mind at rest, you know, whilst there's still discussions around the indexation, we pass on pay increases to our staff, and because we had an issue around potential industrial action this year, we did pay some of the loaders, so the majority of our staff got a higher than the indexation increase.
Right.
And that, so that came out of our pocket, but it did stop the threat of industrial action.
Yeah. Okay. So I mean the final outtake from that paragraph is that you've proposed to hold a meeting to discuss it further, which you've agreed to, which AWS has agreed to. So, I mean, clearly it just needs all parties to come together and hold that meeting, I guess. Kelly, have you got any comments?
Only really, I mean, you know, in terms of doing the calculation that we've done, we've applied, you know, the mechanism that's in the contract on a year-on-year basis, and the proposal that's come back from Amy this time differs from that mechanism. You know, and obviously we can't just change the mechanism, but if there was some substantial argument as to why it should change, then obviously that would need to change retrospectively as well. So, you know, we're more than happy to meet with Amy. We've accepted the request for a meeting. We're just waiting for some proposal dates to come forwards.
Okay, I guess that's more not for this meeting, but more for the management board, is it, to take forward?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And any other questions for Marco? Okay, good. Thanks very much. Item 7, Joint Waste Solutions Programme Progress Report. Who's leading on that?
That's me. So, and you'll have to bear with me because I'm stepping in for Joe on this one. But in between meetings, I've had to catch up on what's going on. So just to kind of run through the performance progress report, you know, again, there have been some positive improvement actions and stuff that's taken place in the last quarter since we met. So the Q2 litter and detritus surveys that were completed in Elmbridge, Mole Valley and Surrey Heath did meet, you know, the targets were within the targets. And we're out at the moment doing the next round of those surveys. There's been quite a lot of progress in relation to the litter bin project. So the solar bins in place within Elmbridge, and those are now in use. And we've managed to secure some additional funding in Surrey Heath, and we're working through the kind of procurement activity that's needed to look at getting those bins in place. What we then need to do is start scoping the Mole Valley activities. So that's a phased approach. We've already mentioned in terms of, you know, the simpler recycling that's been coming through, and we're starting to think about what that might mean for us for the future. you know, and probably most likely through the new procurement. We've been talking about assisted collections quite a lot. We've mentioned the review. So we have completed a review in Mole Valley and Woking. And as Sarah's already said, a number of properties have been removed from those lists because they no longer need to have those collections. We've talked a bit as well about the food waste recycling services. So 1,923 flats in Elmbridge are now having that service in addition to those that were receiving it before. And that post-monitoring activity has commenced to have a look at Elmbridge. So having completed the Mole Valley stuff, we're now moving on to the review of the Elmbridge side of things. We've done a number of improvements as well to recycling bins for 329 flats within the Elmbridge area. So that's obviously to try and increase engagement with the quantity and quality of recycling that we collect from those properties. All of the households within the joint contract areas should have received the latest service guides and calendars for 2024. So those were sent out between the 30th of October and the 6th of November. We've also delivered a significant number of targeted food waste interventions. So this is where we identify rounds predominantly where, you know, there isn't perhaps so much participation in food waste collections. So we're not seeing caddies being presented or the tonnages are low in those areas. And we go out and we place a sticker on their bin to, you know, remind them that you can't put food waste within the residual bin. And we pop a postcard through their door to encourage them to make use of their food waste caddy. So a number of households within Mole Valley and Elmbridge were targeted during October and November. And we'll start to look at the kind of post-monitoring activity to see if that's had a positive effect. From what we've seen in other areas, we are seeing a positive impact in relation to that. So I'd hope to see a similar outcome from this activity. Then we've done obviously, you know, a lot of campaign work, as you know. So we've been doing, you know, the focus on food waste reduction as well as the recycling side of things through the Own Your Impact campaign. And now we're obviously starting to focus on kind of the pre-festive messaging in terms of, you know, we don't like glitter on cards and things like that, you know, for recycling bins. So it's trying to get people to think about purchasing habits as well as recycling habits too. And then there's the Rethink Waste scheme. So across the joint contract area, we've seen quite a lot of residents sign up to the Rethink Waste scheme. We've got 7 primary schools who also have come forwards with, you know, environmental improvement projects that they'd like to take forwards. So the plea on that one really is a continued request for promotion of that scheme and trying to get your residents to engage with that and help reduce their waste, as well as, you know, supporting some of the primary schools with their initiatives. And if you want any details in terms of, you know, the primary schools that are signed up in the joint contract areas, then we can provide that. So the recommendation is obviously that you note the progress in the report and the key outputs, outcomes and achievements during this period.
Okay, good, thanks. A couple of questions from me then, first of all. It mentions, second bullet point, solar litter bins. Certainly, I've been promoting those in Elmbridge for the last 3 years. Excellent idea, because of course they crush the contents, so you can get much more in there. There is also the facility there for electronic monitoring of the levels, so that can be automatically transmitted to a receiving station, so that instead of, say, visiting every week, it may be that it's only half full, so that could be delayed until the following week. Are we yet using that sort of facility?
I'll let Gogo come in a moment. We're not using it at the moment. Unless technology has improved. There was a lot of issues with the sensors in the early versions of them, and I'm not aware that things have changed significantly. But if those sensors get dirty, they record as if the bin is nearing capacity. And so quite often, you know, people can go out to then empty the bins only to find that actually there's not a lot of material in them. So they do require quite a lot of maintenance, you know, because there can be quite a lot of inaccuracy. But I know that Agogo's ready to come in on this one, so I'm going to pass it over to her.
As part of the costings and when we purchase the bins, we've got a 2-year trial, free trial of the software. The supplier hasn't done the installation yet, and the whole idea is we in JWS would get to monitor those levels. We'll have access to the software, and then we will then flag that with Amy. The expectation is that will help to help divert their resources in terms of emptying those bins. But currently, at the moment, we're not using because we're still waiting for installation.
Yeah, okay, good. I know that we've got some green spaces solar bins as well as the street solar bins. I think in Elmbridge we've now got 2. But yeah, I mean, I do know there are some boroughs up and down the country that have gone all out for solar bins, and they are using the monitoring systems to do their collections. There can be quite a significant saving on that. Instead of doing a frequency-based collection, it's on a contents-based collection. Okay, so good to know that there's a trial of that. On the assisted collections point, I see that you've done a review in Mole Valley and Woking. Is that now going to be conducted in Elmbridge and Surrey Heath?
Elmbridge has been completed. Elmbridge was completed before Mole Valley. I think that would be the same, Sarah.
Yeah, same. So Surrey Heaths was completed before Woking's as well. So all 4 areas done and dusted.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks very much. Other questions? Yes, Peter.
Thanks, Ashley. Yeah, it's just to reiterate what I said earlier about the garden waste, and I see on page 31 increased sign-ups to the garden waste, which is really good. Really in favour of that, but I do think we need to have a look at how we communicate subscription renewals and make sure that we are not leaving the residents with a full bin on the last day of their subscription, so that we actually advise them 2 weeks before the end of their subscription that it is due for renewal. So I know I said that earlier, but I just want to reiterate that, please. Yep, that was my only other comment. We talked about fleet decarbonisation, which is really important. And I would really recommend looking at the Cenex report that came out the other day. It was really good. But that's it from me. Thanks, Ashley.
Okay, thanks. Any other comments or questions? I can't see everybody's face there. No, good. Okay, good. Thank you very much, Kelly. Item number 8, Joint Waste Solutions budget proposals.
Back to me again.
Okay.
What I will say on this is Joe would have typically done the bit in relation to the core and variable invoices on the contract. So I will do my best to cover those off in her absence. And I'm sure, again, Sarah and Agogo will come in and help me if I need a bit of support on that. So essentially what the paper does is obviously take you through the process that we've undertaken to look at setting the budget for 24-25. In relation to the staffing and overheads costs that are in here, we've projected these to be about £260,000 higher than was budgeted in 23-24. This is basically down to the proposed 4% pay award that is being looked at by Surrey Heath Borough Council, because obviously we come under them as our host authority. And it also takes into account the accountancy oversight that Marco was referring to in relation to the pension contributions and the apprenticeship levy that wasn't budgeted for in 23-24. So that's the reason for the uplift in, large proportion of the uplift in relation to those areas. What I will say is I'm sure you're aware of the proposal from Surrey County Council to reduce the set budget by £300,000. So this proposal that we're putting forward is draft until we've finished working through you know, the request from the county council and what the kind of outcome of those discussions are, because obviously the budget falls over into this area as well. So we may well have to come back in the new year with a slightly revised proposal. The other thing that's in here in relation to the team costs, so we've reduced the team costs by about £12,000. That's mainly due to a reduction in mileage and parking expenses, and we've also taken out £5,000 from the training budget. We've done a bit of a review of the support service costs, but those costs have again gone up in line with the 4% pay award and the additional overhead costs for the pension and the apprenticeship levy. So you know, that's obviously included for this year too. And we are expecting the IT software costs to increase, you know, due to inflation. What we've included in here in relation to the office is an assumption that we will move out of Duke's Court. But, you know, at the time we were looking potentially at having an alternative location as a smaller office, predominantly for the West Operations team and for the Recycling Improvements team. You know, who need to have some kind of area to work from. We have sort of moved on from this a bit, and we are looking more at having, you know, a more flexible arrangement with some of the authorities to be able to access buildings and hot desk facilities free of charge. So we might actually see a greater saving in the office cost than we've actually budgeted for. But we've been a bit cautious in that just to start with, because obviously we need to let those conversations play out. The health and safety budget has remained unchanged at £2,500. And then there's a series of joint contract authority only budgets in relation to the legal support, the communications and engagement budget, and for business continuity. Moving on then to the core and variable charges. So again, you know, what we generally do here is apply the contract mechanism, so that we go through to look at, you know, what the changes are from 23-24 to setting the new budget for 24-25. So this takes into account, you know, the potential increase for household developments, and also looks at kind of, you know, how the variable services have changed in recent months for things like the bulky waste collection and garden waste subscriptions. And then we obviously look at applying the contract indexation. So the report breaks down the percentage of costs that are sort of split across labour, fuel and other areas. As Marco said earlier, we had a contract uplift last year that we budgeted for 10%, but it's actually kind of come through at around about 6.85 from the calculations that we've got. So we were over in our estimations last time. We've had discussions and meetings with the Section 151 officers to have a look at what we believe is a reasonable uplift for 24-25. And I have noted that some of the dates in this report are incorrect, so we will correct those. But the proposal for 24-25 is an uplift of 7%. But the final calculation will take place in March. That should say 2024 once the figures have been published in January. In terms of the market supplement for the HGV driver wages, as part of the agreement that was in place there was a condition that each year it reduced the rate paid in line with the labour index that's used in the uplift calculation. And once you apply that, it basically means that reduces to 0 for 24-25. So there is no driver market supplement included within this budget for 24-25. The other areas that are in there basically remain unchanged. So, you know, contract costs associated with WE and Textiles, the depot recharges and the savings guarantee are both in a line with the inter-authority agreement. And then the final bit is the proposal for additional funding to establish the procurement project team. So I think, you know, I was talking recently about the fact that, you know, the current contract expires in 2027, and when you work the timeline backwards, we basically need to start working on this project from about April of next year. So we start looking at reviewing the inter-authority agreement and developing a procurement strategy. So the head of commercial role that we've touched upon, the sort of rejig of what was Neil's role, will take on the responsibility for leading that procurement project with support from Joe and I, and will then be looking at recruiting 2 senior officers to support that that role, the head of commercial. It may well be that we second people within JWS, you know, if people want to take on a new challenge, to, you know, to look at that role. But we'll basically be having 2 senior officers to support that. And then what we've done is looked at the additional costs that, you know, would be needed to support that activity. So we've made some assumptions around perhaps consultancy support from procurement, legal and technical providers. What I will say, though, is wherever possible, we will try to reduce those costs and do as much as we can in-house or within, you know, the existing teams within the joint contract authorities. So, for example, Gavin and I have had quite a lengthy conversation about legal support. He is keen for the heads of legal to kind of get together and, you know, provide support to reviewing the existing contract and supporting the procurement process themselves without having to actually go externally to get, you know, a legal company in to help us. But that will come down to what resources are available, you know, and sort of what other work those legal teams are doing. But like I say, wherever possible, we will try to reduce the costs as much as we possibly can. So the total cost for 24-25, if, you know, if we do need to go and have that consultancy support, is just shy of £285,000. What I have prepared separately is a briefing note in relation to the totality of the costs for the life of the project. So the first stage of it takes up to contract award, and then the second element of it looks at, you know, mobilising into the new contract. So I'll share that with you all later this week. I was hoping that Jo would be able to review it this morning, but unfortunately, obviously, she's off sick. So once she's back, I'd like her to have a look at that before I send it around. So the recommendations, basically, the committee is being asked to agree the 24-25 staff and overhead budgets, but subject to any changes in the funding provided to SEC for the SEP element. Like I say, we may have to come back with a revised proposal. Agree the 24-25 joint contract budgets, including the removal of the allowance for the driver market supplement. Agree the additional financial provision for reviewing the inter-authority agreement and developing the procurement strategy for a new contract so that we can commence the tender process, and commend the proposal to your individual authorities for approval.
Good. Thank you very much, Kelly. I think before we come on to the recommendations then, I'm a little bit troubled by this £300,000 reduction from Surrey County Council to SEP. Of the SEP funding, is it possible to say how much of that goes to JWS?
So, cool, you're testing me now. I've got to try and remember. My head had switched into joint contract away from SEP, so now I've got to flick back again. So there's about £1.3 million that gets paid into the SEP for, you know, which is a mixture of direct money from SCC and effectively the top slice of the recycling payments that you each receive that obviously gets diverted into JWS. So it is about a 28% reduction in the funding of what's being asked for. Sorry, it's 1.2 million. So it's, yeah, it's about a 28% reduction.
So that's quite a significant reduction, isn't it? But I think what you're saying is that I assume that that's part of what Surrey County Council are calling one of their efficiency savings.
So, I mean, I can let Richard chip in from the county council's perspective at the moment, or not. He's shaking his head. But I think the issue that we've got is the decision was taken back in 2020, 2021 to reduce the amount of funding that was paid into SEP because a significant amount of reserves had built up. So there was about £900,000 in reserves. So it was right to obviously draw down on the reserves more and reduce that. And it was anticipated that by now we would have the extended producer responsibility mechanism in place and that the funding flows would be coming through from government. So we kind of anticipated that the current financial arrangements would be superseded by what would happen through extended producer responsibility. And if you remember back in the summer, we started the work to say, well, actually now that's been delayed, the pot of money is going to run out for the Surrey Environment Partnership. So we need to look at developing a medium-term financial strategy to sustain the future of the partnership until the EPR stuff comes through to supersede it. Then in October, we were quite a way through that process. I think we were about ready to bring it forwards for approval. And then I received the letter from the County Council saying we'd like to withdraw £300,000 from the funding that we provide to the partnership. So that sort of, threw things up in the air. The reason it threw things up even more is because of the knock-on effect on the reserves. So because we've been drawing down on the reserves, we've effectively been overspending against our income each year because we were taking money out of the reserves pot. So whilst £300,000, is the ask, the impact of that over the 3 years is actually closer to £600,000 because of the knock-on effect of not having the reserves in place in the future. So we actually had a conversation and a meeting with the County Council yesterday to talk that through in more detail and talk about the implications. And so now the County Council has gone away to have a look and kind of review the costings and everything that we've put forward to then come back and sort of say what their position is, whether that remains the same and unchanged, or whether that position is changing slightly. So that's really where we've got to in relation to that. And we're just sort of in that holding position. But it would have a significant impact on the services that are provided through the SEP.
Yeah, but just to clarify, it's not 300,000 reduction in the money coming from Surrey to JWS. It's a £300,000 reduction in the money going to SEP.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think I had one more question just on clarifying. Oh yes, office costs. You said the lease expires in August 2023. That means it's already expired.
Sorry.
24.
It should be 24. No, yeah 24. Yeah.
Okay. I mean it. I don't know whether other boroughs and councils, I assume that boroughs and districts are the same as Elmbridge, but we've got ample empty space in our civic centre, as the GoGo well knows. So I'm sure that lodging in one of the district or borough offices free of charge will be something that could make a saving there.
Yeah, and I know Nick's hand's gone up as well. So I'm aware that those kind of offerings we do already come into Elmbridge, as it is. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get something in place. What we don't want to be, because we've been in a position like this before, is where we'd need access to like the larger committee rooms and things to be able to have team meetings, for example, because there's a few of us, so we'd need a sizable meeting room. What we don't want is to book all of those meetings in advance, have them scheduled and then be booted out because something else takes priority, because that leaves us in a challenging position as to what do we then do, where do we then go. So it's just kind of getting that agreement in place with the authorities that we can access desks and be able to hot desk and have access to smaller meeting rooms as and when needed, but also that we can have access to the larger meeting rooms to support our business, if you like, for team meetings.
I'm sure that could be worked through amicably.
Yeah.
Okay, oh yes, Nick, you have a question?
It wasn't a question, it was a comment around the office space. I think like the other 3 boroughs and probably all of the partnership boroughs across the county, our doors are always open and the kettle's always on. There's minor practicalities, I guess, around how you get access cards and how you deal with room booking systems and things like that. But I know that certainly amongst the 4 partner authorities, the offer is always there. Surrey Heath isn't as geographically well located as you might like within JWS, but you know, there's plenty of space.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Are there any more questions or comments?
Councillor
Peter?
Graves.
Yeah.
Yes, Nick, I agree. We've got the same offer in Woking. There's plenty of space, and it's Duke's Court you're in at the moment, isn't it, Kelly?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there will be more space available. I'm sure that there'll be larger meeting rooms available as well for you to take up. But yeah, I was going to ask. Ashley's kind of asked the question, but the likely impact of this 300k reduction of funding. I mean, you've spoken eloquently about that. But I mean, obviously, my concern is how much Woking would be asked to contribute to that, and is that a figure that you could give us if we were to have to take that 300k hit?
So as it stands at the moment, there is no ask on the districts and boroughs. So where we were back in the summer to be able to sustain the, partnership, we were looking to increase the top size from each of the authorities by about £5,000 per authority.
Right.
Then obviously, came along the taking or the proposal to remove the £300,000. So we've just purely looked at the impact on that. The I can't remember exactly, 1.3 million, 1.2 million that is paid direct to the districts and boroughs has been ring fenced under the proposal. So the intention from SCC is that won't be touched for 24-25. I don't know beyond that, but we know that is, like I say, ring fenced to your services for 24-25. The impression that we got, particularly from the Section 151 officers, was, if the county council were going to look at removing £300,000, they didn't think it was reasonable that was then subsidised by the districts and boroughs. So at the moment, we haven't gone down that route of, could we look at recouping any of this from the districts and boroughs? And equally, we understand that, you've all got your own financial challenges to varying different degrees as well. So we're trying to find a way, to work with the county council to look at how can we make some savings that are reasonable savings that doesn't impact too much on the service that we deliver, and doesn't impact on, the money that is currently flowing through to the districts and boroughs. That's almost an impossible challenge, but we're doing the best we can to try and move things forward. And like I say, we presented some figures back to the county council yesterday, and we're waiting to hear their position in response to that.
So we're in a sort of holding position. I mean, on the same lines, what is going to be the cost of the procurement project per borough? You've come up with a figure of 284. Is that going to be split 4 ways? How does that work?
So I've actually produced, I don't know if I can share it actually, let me see. I'm not so good on Zoom, but let me see what I can do. Bear with me one moment. Can you see that says new joint contract procurement team? You can.
We've got
okay.
That.
So this is a paper that, like I say, I produced to start sharing with everybody, and it goes through. So the top bit there was just the timetable that we're looking at. Then it goes through kind of what was the budget that was in place for the last procurement, which was basically £520,000. And then I've used just the annual inflation rate to have a look at what that means in today's money. So using the estimated 7% for 22-23, that takes it up to 664,000 broadly. Here, what it does is looks at the procurement costs for 24 to 26. So that's ahead of mobilisation. And this is where I've kind of estimated the resources that, you know, might be required. As I say, we will try to do as much of this internally between either the support service teams or JWS without having to go, you know, and procure consultants if we can help it. So to me, this is the worst case scenario. So when you look at that, you're looking at about £660,000, which actually isn't too far off the uplifted figure. What I then envisaged is that we'd probably need 2 senior officers for the mobilisation period, so the year from 26 to 27. And then I've broken it down. So at the moment, there is a partnership share steady state within the existing agreement. Now, these proportions could change as we look at reviewing the inter-authority agreement, but I've assumed for the moment that these rates would stay the same. And then as you flow that through, I've done a breakdown in the table for each year, what that would mean for each authority. So Councillor Graves, obviously Woking has got the lowest proportion because at the moment we don't provide street cleaning services for you, so your percentage is less. But you can see there for year 1, you'd be looking at 56,000, year 2, 51. And then year 3, I've assumed 6 months that takes us to contract award. But on top of that, you then have to include the mobilisation element as well. So the total cost for Woking would be about 150,000. That is if we do the worst case scenario of having to get consultancy support in. So, you know, we'd basically be looking at doing it on an open book basis and recharging through the proportions for what we actually spent.
Okay. I mean, I would have to talk to officers about what budget that would come from and how we'd actually pay for it, because clearly we don't have money at the moment. We don't have any cash, and we have no reserves either. So, you know, it's a really difficult. We're in a very difficult situation. I suspect other boroughs are going to be in similar situations in 2 or 3 years' time. So, anything that you can do to keep those costs down would be really gratefully received.
Yeah, we absolutely will. And to be honest, the reason for kind of preparing that paper was off the back of a conversation that Mark and I had, where he said we would have to take this forward, you know, to get the approval. And then I thought, well, actually, everybody's probably going to need something. There's a couple of other bits, if you like, that I can try and add into that as well, which, you know, would take into account this is you doing it all together. If you were to go out individually, you know, those costs arguably might be greater because, you know, you're not going to factor it back just by going out on your own. So I can put some additional text and commentary in there around that to support the argument too. But I've worked on a worst case scenario because, you know, if for whatever reason the internal legal teams or procurement teams can't provide the support that we need, then we would have to bring in some consultancy support because we can't delay the project because we'll be out of contract.
Okay, thank you.
Good, thanks. Any other questions?
Yes, Councillor
Morgan.
Just on that point then, do we as the 4 joint authorities need to make a decision prior to this kind of work starting? In terms of, do we 4 need to agree that we're going to continue essentially kind of 2.5 years before the contract is actually renewed? Is that a decision we have to take now, as in we're going to stay in the joint authority, we're going to continue as we are, or we're going to strike out on our own? Is that, do we have to do, and I'm pretty sure my colleagues have been having these conversations internally and thoughts themselves, but is there a deadline when we must have made a decision about how the next contract is essentially going to look in terms of membership?
Yeah, so that's the piece of work that I see happening from April through to December next year, as you know, December being the ultimate backstop. Obviously, if people do want to pull out of the joint contract or go a different tact, I would expect that to come out fairly quickly after those discussions start. But from the April, that's where we will pick up the inter-authority agreement and basically say, what do we like about this agreement? What don't we like about this agreement? Is everybody still wanting to be part of this agreement? And then when we look at the procurement strategy, we would go through the what are the other options for doing this? How could this be delivered? And that will cover off all scenarios, you know, take it back in-house, have a local authority company, procure individually, procure collectively. And it will take through kind of the steps, the finances associated with that, and the risks and issues. You know, and one of the things that I would say is, obviously, at the moment, we're probably quite attractive to the market because of the size of us, you know, as 4 authorities together. And we know that there's going to be quite a few other authorities tendering at a similar time to us. So resources within, you know, the bid teams are going to be limited, and they're probably going to be selecting which authorities they want to bid for. If people then want to go separately, it reduces obviously the mass of the 4 authorities, plus effectively you'll be out to tender at the same time. So you'll be competing against each other for that bid resource. So it's all of those elements that we'll be putting into, you know, the procurement strategy for a decision to be made. But that's the point where we'll be looking for steers from each of the authorities as to what's your appetite? Do you still want to stay together? What's the direction of travel? But I think certainly from the conversations that we've been having so far, everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, but everybody does seem to want to stay together at the moment. It's just working out kind of the best mechanism and approach for doing that.
Just to come in, just to follow up, can we also, and I'm sure you are already thinking about this as well, can we, as an extra option, look at how we could potentially increase the membership of the joint authority as well, of bringing in, if there are other authorities that are tendering at the same time, can we go to them and say, we're an attractive offer, we're going to get the best deal, so why don't you come with us to get the best service rather than trying it on your own? To increase ourselves to get even a better offer, but also how increase the share of income coming in.
So we absolutely will be. We'll be going out to all Surrey authorities to see if anybody else wants to join us. The only other authority in Surrey that we know will be out to tender at the same time is Waverley, because their contract expires around a similar time. Other than that, they are authorities outside of Surrey that will be out. So Westminster, for example, I think Haringey's out at the same time. But you know, they're sort of further afield. But they don't necessarily, if we do grow the partnership, they don't necessarily need to mobilise on the contract from day one. It's just so long as we include them in the tender process, they could then join at a later date if they wanted to. So, but we will, as part of that process, be going out to all the authorities in Surrey to say, does anybody else want to get involved?
Yeah. Thanks, Morgan. We did touch upon that at the pre-meeting briefing, because absolutely right. If we can get economies of scale by expanding the JWS area, I mean, geographically, it will make sense for Spelthorne and Runnymede to join JWS, as well as probably Waverley. So yeah, I think you know, presumably your negotiations ought to include those 2 councils as well, Kelly.
Like I say, we'll go out to all the Surrey authorities and see where everybody, you know, is at, because just because people have got in-house services or their contracts don't expire at the same time doesn't mean that they, you know, don't have a desire to change or, you know, want to do things differently in the future. And like I say, they don't necessarily have to come in from day one. To some extent, it might make our lives easier if they don't come from day one, to be honest, because then we'd stage the mobilisation period a bit. But absolutely, we will talk to all the authorities to see where everybody's at.
Okay. In terms of this additional funding then for the procurement team, has that been run past our Section 151 finance officers? Do they know this is coming? Oh.
That's a perfect time for Kelly to freeze, isn't it?
You've stopped, Kelly. We can't hear you. Your internet is frozen.
Oh, am I back?
You're back. Right.
Just as I started to talk, I was like, no, I'm frozen. So not in any great detail. They're aware that we would need to make provision within the budget, you know, to have procurement activity. But again, kind of the reason as well behind me developing that briefing note was so that we can update the Section 151 officers. So following the meetings that we've had with the Section 151 officers to set the budget for this year, we did agree that actually it would be helpful to meet with them on a quarterly basis to keep them up to speed. And that's to take into account all of these things. So it's the procurement team, it's the potential costs of a future contract and the capital requirement for new vehicles, so that we can keep them up to speed and engaged as all of that develops.
Right. Okay. So I think you're saying it's not going to come as too much of a surprise, but the actual figure is not, hasn't yet been determined, and there's the uncertainty over the 300,000 from Surrey in any case.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. I think we need to put forward the recommendations and make sure that the 4 members agree those recommendations. So we've got agree the 24-25 JWS staff and overhead budgets, subject to any changes in the funding provided by SCC. We've got agree the 24-25 joint contract budget, including the removal of an allowance for the driver market supplement. Agree the additional financial provision to review the IAA, the inter-authority agreement, develop a procurement strategy for the new contract, and commence the tender process, which we've discussed. And finally, commend the above to their individual authorities for approval. Are we all happy to agree those recommendations?
Agreed.
And Morgan nodding his head. Great. Okay. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank
Good.
you.
So could I just, I know I've agreed, just a further point. I mean, we all 4 of our councils have financial problems that we're dealing with. Obviously, Peters is the most acute. And obviously there are pressures that we're facing. These can obviously go to our officers to kind of go through what is now the process if our authorities were to say no, because obviously, especially with regards to the increases to the future spending, because obviously our budget, especially in Surrey Heath, we're, as people will know, we're kind of going through our budget process as we all are. So it's just how fitting it all in. If we can't get it in, I just want to know what the process is, because I don't know what the right way to respond to that is. Nick knows what I mean, but it's just, how do we work that? Sorry, Kelly.
No, that's fine. That's fine. So I think, you know, the first 2 elements of it should be fine, because they're the areas that are anticipated in relation to obviously the JWS standard costs and the core contractor, you know, and variable contract, so which is all set out and should be effectively budgeted for. So those elements should be fine. I think if if there's anything around the procurement aspect that needs more information, then, you know, myself or Joe from JWS would be more than happy to attend any meetings that are needed to talk that through. Like I said, I think the bit that I need to put into the paper that isn't currently in there is what else does it mean? What other options have we got? What are the risks associated with not taking this forwards? And obviously, if we do delay the approval to the procurement budget, then we have the risk that actually we squeeze the timeline for actually getting a new contract in place. You know, and we know that Amy are looking to remove themselves from the waste market, and so we won't have an incumbent contractor. You know, so the alternatives around that are things like taking it back in-house or having a local authority company, which we know will be more expensive than, you know, going out to tender. So I think, you know, it's kind of putting the points across, and the point that we said earlier about, you know, if the alternative is to go individually and do it on your own, which again won't necessarily generate savings, because we've got some economies of scale by doing it as a partnership. So I think it's those things that we need to set out. I think the impact would be if we don't, you know, I'm happy to be challenged and to look at reducing the costs if we need to, and I've accepted to reduce those costs as the project move forwards. You know, if I don't need to get procurement support, I won't get it. We'll use it from internal staff. That's absolutely fine. But I think if we delay too much in terms of approving the budget, we risk having a new contract in place on time.
Thank you, Kelly. That explains everything. Just I guess the point that I am trying to raise was, I think we're all aware that there's going to be an increase in the cost with the new contract. I think it's what I think some of us probably weren't expecting or hadn't factored in was the cost of kind of the pre-work of the tendering process. So I think if there can be like that, I think you just said it, a full explanation of how it would work. It is the worst case scenario, and areas where you think, I'm putting this in as a worst case scenario, but I think this can probably be filled by in-house. This is likely to be consultant. This is likely that, just to detail where that could be. I think that would kind of reassure my finance portfolio holder when I recommend this to her. But yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, good. And I think that was a useful question. Thanks for that, Morgan. But yes, I think as long as all the boroughs and districts understand the risks to not approving it, the risks to delaying the procurement, holding up the tendering processes, having to put in some sort of interim measure, I mean, those are enormous potential costs if we don't have a smooth transition from one contractor to the next. So it's from my point of view, it certainly makes sense to get on with that work as Kelly has outlined, start that process from April next year.
I think, Ashley, if I might just say, it's just that we need to be reassured that everything is being done to keep the costs as low as possible. I think Kelly's, you will. But it's and I'm really glad that Morgan's raised it. I've raised it. Ashley's raised it. I'm sure Rosemary agrees that we really must keep those down as much as we possibly can. Is that okay? Thank you.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. And like I say, well, I was trying to do a comparison to last time, and what was really difficult was there was so many bits of people that were used from different authorities to provide support to it that I had no justification of how many hours of people's time was spent on things. So that's why I stripped it right back to, because at the end of the day, I haven't included any of my time in there, but I'll clearly be, sponsoring the project and leading it forward. So I've just tried to kind of trim it back to what's those additional costs over and above the resources that we've already got. And like I say, that's worst case scenario. I think most of you know my approach to things by now. I'd rather give you a cautious estimate as to what I think it is, so that if we do need to have those additional resources, we're not coming back cap in hand to ask for more money. But I will always try and bring things in under budget. And I'm very conscious of the financial situation impacting all of us.
Can I ask, Kelly, that you circulate to all of us the breakdown of the percentages and therefore the costs per borough and district, so we're aware of that. We know the total there is 285,000, but how, that's really useful to know how that breaks down to each borough and district. If you could circulate those, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Right, thanks very much. So we've agreed the recommendations, which brings us on to agenda item number 9, which is just dates of future meetings. So we've planned a very similar sort of process, pre-briefings at 10 o'clock, collection services committee at 11:30 going forward. So we've got June, September, December, and next March. How many of us are going to be here in June depends probably very much on elections in May, but who knows? Or whether we actually want to continue with the rubbish portfolios.
I do have a Councillor, I do have a question. I find the briefing then meeting difficult to square with my work commitments. I don't want to prevent the rest of you having that. I'm happy to attend, as I have done today, and if possible, I will attend both. It's just that I may not be always be able to attend the briefing if they're held on the same day.
Yeah, thanks. I gave up work about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but I agree. I used to find that difficult as well. I was sort of sitting at work, hiding away in a corner with a pair of headphones on, hoping nobody would notice that I wasn't actually doing any useful work. So I don't know whether there is a better way of doing it. I mean, from your point of view, Morgan, would it be easier to separate them over 2 different mornings?
I think for me, the easiest would be to say have them on different days. Yes, separate them. Potentially have the briefing a week before, or a briefing around when the agenda is prepared. that would be the easiest for me. But I appreciate that I'm only one voice. If it's preferred to maintain the briefing and the meeting on the same day, then I won't push it, but I will, just as long as there's the acceptance that I may not be able to attend every briefing.
I think it's not a bad idea. I mean, here we are coming up to 1:20, and we've devoted quite a long time to these sessions. So I think maybe we could look into separating them out onto different mornings, and we could, possibly start the first one. I'm quite keen on starting meetings slightly earlier, if that's at all possible. So you're not then binding up the whole of the morning into Zoom meetings. We can review that then. Is that with is it Catherine in Democratic Services?
Rachel.
Rachel.
I'm happy to talk to JWS about that and come back to you all for the next meeting. Would be helpful. But continue as proposed in March, but then thereafter change if that works for everyone.
Yes.
Okay, Thursday, 21st of March. Well, let's have that conversation. I think, there's no reason I think why we couldn't even have this meeting on the 21st of March, but maybe a pre-briefing a few days beforehand.
But like Rachel said, we can pick it up with her and see kind of what's available. From our perspective, once the papers are produced, we're largely prepped in terms of what it is we want to say and what we want to brief you on. So whether we brief you on the day or whether we brief you a week before, I don't think really makes that much difference from a JWS perspective, because the legwork is there effectively for us to build on. So Joe and I can pick it up with Rachel and we can look at what we can do. The only other thing, sorry, go on.
I think there might be an advantage in us getting our heads together by having a pre-meeting briefing a few days before this session. Just to sort of get your mind into gear as to what the issues are, what the questions are, and what we really need to discuss in the full meeting. Yeah,
that's fine. And we do take a similar approach on the SEP side of things. Actually, it's a staged approach to that. The only other thing that I was going to say, Councillor Tilling, is obviously we may need to put in the extraordinary meeting in the second half of January. So it might be that there's an additional meeting that goes in, but we'll keep you posted in relation to that.
Just one final question. Sorry.
And sorry, the purpose of that extraordinary meeting is what?
So to bring back the revised budget.
Oh, right, okay. And that's when you know a little bit more about the 300k reduction.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Okay, yes, sorry.
It's me again, sorry, Councillor.
Okay,
but is there a provision for substitute members of this committee? But there is. So I think it's for Sarah Heath, it's the leader, isn't it? Yes, and that's fine, good, because just in January I'm away in the later weeks, so I may not be able to be here.
Right. Okay, well, we have no definite date, so we'll see how that goes and see what the need is. Great, good. Well, thanks very much, everybody who's attended. I know one or two have had to leave early, which is an indication of how long we are spending on these meetings. So, some useful presentations there, hopefully some good questions so we understand the situation slightly better. I see that Sarah's background is the only one that looks at all Christmassy with a tree and lights. So finally, may I wish you all a good Christmas.
Yes, and to all of you too. Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Merry Christmas,
Thanks
everyone.
very much.
Thank you, Ashley.
Merry
Thank you,
Christmas.
Karen.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Merry Christmas.
Happy
Thanks.
Christmas.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.